So the Chicago Blackhawks had the second overall pick and went the other direction than I would have gone if I were them, but was it all bad? Let's find out. So the Chicago Blackhawks were the second overall selection team this season at the draft, and it did seem increasingly likely that Artyom Levshunov was going to be a Blackhawk, and personally, I disagree with the decision. I look at a guy like Connor Bedard and go, it would be really cool to have Ivan Demidov play with Connor Bedard for the next 20 years, but Artyom Levshunov is just a guy who I think has a long way to go to be a second overall worthy defenseman. Yes, I get it. He's a decent skater for his size, he can be a physical player, but in my work, I look at the overall picture and the overall results in the game, and with Levshunov, I think there's a lot of question marks. I really am not sure where his offense is coming from based on his 5-on-5 play outside of shots from the point. I'm not really sure about the skill level or deception in transition or the puck rushing ability. His ability to pass the puck up the ice is really mixed and his vision can be a little bit weird. He has a clear intent to want to play physically, but doesn't quite have the footwork yet to close those gaps and erase guys along the boards reliably. At one point, I watched a game against Michigan where he lost 3 board battles to Gavin Brindley in basically 2 shifts. And that's me maybe nitpicking a little bit, but I did find that Levshunov was talked about in a way that I didn't really see much evidence of. But look, he's a defenseman and he can take longer to develop, of course. I can't say it's impossible. He doesn't become the top pair defenseman that everyone seems to think he's going to be, and if he does, good for him. That's amazing. That's great, and Chicago did a great job here. I just feel like step 1, he needed another year in college. They're bringing him out of college immediately. To me, that's already a bit of a weird one. We'll see what happens with him. I wouldn't have gone in this direction at second overall. I hope for the best for him in Chicago. You have Connor Bedard on the team. We'll see. At 18th overall, they drafted Sacha Bard, who I had a little bit lower and outside the first round, but he does have a first-round talent profile. Bard is a guy who, when he applies himself, he's a very tall, lanky, but very, very mobile center. He's involved in play on and off, I would say, but when he is involved, he's very effective. He's got some really good offensive zone skill, a great shot that he uses from mid-range quite often. I just think he's a player that you're gonna have to develop and bet on and maybe take a few years with before he becomes the high-end player that I think he can be. There is a lot of potential with Bard, but he doesn't quite show it as much as I would have liked in my games that I've seen him, but at the end of the day, he's a good player. Drafting him here, I think it makes sense. There were other directions I might have gone, but if you want a big, mobile center who can skate, which Chicago clearly wants in the last couple of drafts, he's not a bad option. At 27th, Chicago drafted a bit of a different flavor of hockey player than I'm used to them drafting in Merv Vaner. I think Vaneker's a guy who projects decently well to be a bottom 6 energetic guy. He's got some physical tools and he resists pressure really, really well. He finds ways around that pressure to make plays really well. He's just a really meat and potatoes hockey player who just goes out and plays solid hockey and is hard to stop when he's doing it. The question for me is he's hard to stop at the OHL level, and we'll see what happens when he's against bigger, faster, more physical competition. But I did like Vaneker this year, and in the late first round, sure, if you get yourself a bottom 6 guy, you've done well. And I feel like it capped off a really good first round for Chicago, all things considered. I think they got 3 decent players. At 67th overall, they drafted John Mustard, a personal favorite of this channel. John Mustard is a huge upside swing. Right now, he's not there yet. You can tell. He is all speed, all shot, and I do think he improved over the course of the year, but there's not a whole lot outside of that. Similar to a guy like Bard, he's a guy that when he's really on, you love, and then he can kind of disappear for a while. But the potential for Mustard is undeniable. He's another one of these really fast up and down the ice guys with really good finishing skill, and at 67th overall, this is a round where I probably would have been more than happy taking him. He was 44th on my list. I think he's a good pick to take. You can leave him in college for quite a while. He's going to Providence, which is a program that does love these skilled guys, and I did see a few really good games out of Mustard at the end of the year where he was distributing the puck a little bit more, making better shot decisions, and applying himself physically a little bit more, but I'm going to need to see that more often across a bigger sample in order to be more confident. He's an interesting player, he brings a lot of really high-end tools, and I think he's a good fit for what Chicago's trying to build. At 72nd, they drafted another big, fast player in AJ Spellacy of the Windsor Spitfires, and Spellacy's been an interesting one for me this season. Again, all speed. If anything, in a way, he's like John Mustard, but in the OHL. I think Spellacy is an interesting pick to make. He's got a lot of interesting tools. Again, not a whole lot of diversity in his game right now, but there is a good skill level foundation, a really high pace to his game naturally, and if he can gain a bit more of a physical edge, I could see him being a thing in the future. At 92nd, they drafted Jack Prym, the player that most people said was probably the best draft eligible in the BCHL, and I don't know, he's one of the oldest players for a first-time eligible this year, and when I watched him in the BCHL this year, he didn't really blow me away. There's a pretty good shot on him, he's a decent skater, but I thought using 92nd overall on him was a bit rich and a bit hasty, but he could be a complementary forward for these faster players like Spellacy or Mustard down the lineup at some point. I just feel like he's going to be a player where you need to let him develop and see what he turns into in college. At 138, they drafted a re-entry player in Joelenson from Växjö in the Swedish Junior League. And let me tell you, if there's anything Joelenson can do, it's score goals. That's about all he did this year. Granted, he is an interesting player. I think he has a lot of skill in goal-scoring areas. He scored goals with both his shot quality and the skill level leading into opening up the goaltender or opening up the net so he can score a little easier. There's a diverse skill set when it comes to goal scoring for Svensson, and he's been an interesting individual player this year. Outside of that, I didn't really see a whole lot with him, but I am pleasantly surprised to see him drafted, and you can leave him in Sweden for a while. He had a really good season if you want goal scoring. So we'll see what happens over the next little while. And at 163rd, they drafted Ty Henry. And out of all of the guys that I didn't really see that got drafted, looking at Ty Henry since the draft has been really interesting. I think he is a long shot, but I kind of see what Chicago is getting at with him. He's pretty mobile, he's got a bit of skill to him as well, he's got a physical edge here and there that I really liked to see when he pulled it out. So yeah, I think Ty Henry is an interesting late round swing to make. Maybe not the one that I would have made, but I do think considering his youth and the rawness of his physical frame, you could turn him into something at some point somehow. He's got an interesting mindset, and there are some tools that I think you could bet on, and yeah, I think it was an interesting pick for Chicago and a pleasantly surprising player for me at 163. So for me, I'm giving Chicago a 2A. I look at who they drafted, and I would not be surprised to see 5 players play NHL games at some point. Mustard and Spellacy could be complementary energy players. Vaner could be a decent power forward down their lineup. Boisvert could be a good middle six center or a winger that brings a lot of offensive potential. I like Artyom Levshinov and thought he was a good defenseman in this class, but at 2, look, Ivan Demidov is just on another level creatively that you do not see in young players really at all. And saying no to that to take to me maybe a middle pair defenseman when you could have paired him with a guy like Connor Bedard, I will be very curious to see how that turns out. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I hope Levshinov turns out to be what everyone thinks he is. I was having dreams about those 2 players connecting with each other for the next decade on the Chicago Blackhawks. And look, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I feel like Montreal is feeling pretty good about the player that they landed at 5th. So that's it for the Chicago Blackhawks. If you liked it, you can go to our description box and find our Fanatics affiliate link, where anything you buy in the store will give us a small kickback. Or you can go to Scouching.ca, where a subscription gets you a private Discord server access, as well as plenty of data tables for drafted and undrafted prospects, and plenty of other cool toys you can check out on that site. So that's it for the Chicago Blackhawks, and in the next one, we're going to look at the Buffalo Sabres.